Welcome to She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting. We're your hosts, Questian
and Nancy McClelland.
And every episode, we're digging into the real experiences, challenges, and unspoken truths of life in this profession.
Because if you've ever felt like you're the only one, you're not, and you shouldn't have to figure it out alone.
Special thanks to our Season 2 sponsors, Forwardly, Relay, and Client Hub. We are so very grateful to them for helping us bring these conversations to life, enabling us to share out loud what everyone's thinking, but no one is saying. You can learn more about them on our sponsors page at shecounts.show.
Today's episode is called ADHD, Chaos with a Side of Brilliance. And we have a special guest with us, our dear friend, Jana Etienne. We're going to discuss how ADHD manifests differently in women, why we often go undiagnosed, and tools to harness ADHD as a superpower.
So Jana is a speaker, trainer. She does keynote presentations. This woman is a powerhouse. She is a CPA who is in practice for 23 years, 17 years on her own, and 5 years at a big 8. She is a wife and mom and has a puppy that we get to hear about a lot, which is not actually a puppy, right? Named Doug. And Jana, I want you to share, because when I was asking her to give us some information for her bio, I was really excited because typically the information that we get is all professional, but Jana shared some really interesting things about herself, like her favorite song, her favorite colors and why. And then, so tell us what those are. And then I have another one I want to ask you about.
Well, first, Questian and Nancy, thank you so much for having me. I've been loving this podcast, so I'm really honored to be invited to be on this with you, and such an important topic. But what is it about some of the things that I put on there? I'm curious what you wanted me to list, because I have in there a lot of interesting things, like I'm an Arsenal fan.
Oh, yeah. I'm a Liverpool fan.
Well,
so we're like fighting. Okay. We're like
we can still talk, as long as you're not a Tottenham fan, because then I would have just hung up right now.
Honestly, I am relieved, because that could have gone really poorly.
It could have.
I don't know that I'm a fan of any football team, except I can say Boca Juniors, because my mom's from Buenos Aires, and you have to either be a Boca fan or a River Plate fan. So Boca all the way. I've never actually seen them play, but
Yeah.
I'm excited that we can still be friends, even though we have dueling football teams. They're not quite real rivals exactly, though. So it's like, it can pass.
No, well, but Liverpool won the Premier League last year. So you all let us win this year, and then we can stay friends. How about
then we can stay friends. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah.
The most fun fact that I saw that I was so excited about was that you have a motorcycle license.
Yes.
That was a surprise.
Back in the day, I used to ride a motorcycle. Now, I've never had my own, but my brother would let me drive. I shouldn't say drive. Never say drive on a motorcycle. Let me ride. And for anybody who knows, his was a GSXR 700. And my husband got a GSXR 1100 because, and then another friend had a Ninja that they let me ride. So we would go riding together all the time. And after I got pregnant, I never got on a bike again.
Oh,
I can understand why. Yeah.
No, it was for safety reasons, because an accident on a motorcycle is often catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's so true.
But it was fun to have one. I think I looked cute when I was on the bike.
We're going to have to see a picture.
There's one on my personal blog, actually.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you here. And I'm thrilled that you shared some fun facts outside of professional facts. I think we're going to have to do that from now on all of our episodes.
Well, and I think the most important one that we should from now on ask everybody is your theme song, because I don't know this one, Silver Shadow by Atlantic Starr. I'm going to look that up.
What's important to me about that song dates back to the 80s. And what that song talks about is that you have a vision for yourself, and you have to trust that vision and that you will get there. I mean, I would tell you, I would read the lyrics for you because I know them by heart. But I think for me, it's the bottom line is cast a silver shadow, and you basically will follow that shadow into your life. And
That's
I've always believed
beautiful.
that to be true,
Mm.
that somehow I'll get there, even if I don't know where is.
Well, we love launching each episode with a story, and today, Question and Jana are both going to share with us their ADHD diagnosis stories.
Jana, why don't you tell us your story first?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed in my early 40s. My son, my youngest son, is my mini me. His name is Dominic. And I became so self aware because I would watch Dominic do things and I would be like, where is he? Oh, yeah, that's kind of me. And my husband shares this story where Dominic was really into this project. This is middle school. He was really into this project. He'd worked really hard on the project. My husband takes him to school, drops him off, and then he says, "So, Dominic, where's the project?" Like he forgot to bring it to school. And my husband's thinking, how can you be so invested in something and completely forget? And he thought maybe it's ADHD or there's something else at play. So we got him diagnosed. And once his diagnosis was confirmed, I went to talk to the psychiatrist who did the diagnosis. There are a lot of ways to get diagnosed, but I met with the psychiatrist and I asked her, "How do I parent this child? Like, what is it that I need to know?" And she gave me a book called Driven to Distraction. And in that book, there's a section that talks about diagnosis and how you get diagnosed. And if you have more than, I think it was like 12 of these characteristics that are, they describe where and why, out of 20, you might have ADHD. Well, I think it was more than 8 or 9. I had 12. And so I called back and I said, "Can you diagnose me?" And that's how I got diagnosed. It wasn't from my own awareness, it was because it runs in families and my son had it. So maybe he got it from somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. And my son is not diagnosed, but he and I, like you said, he is very much my mini me. And I have said to him, he's 14, so he's getting older now. And I've tried to get him to go and be, and see if does have ADHD. And he is, you know, not wanted to go and do it. So I haven't really pressed him, but there are so many similarities between the two of us. And interestingly, I too went to get diagnosed from seeing and hearing someone else who had a diagnosis, which is why this episode's so important too, is people openly talking about what they're experiencing. Because when I heard what my friend was experiencing, then I was like, wow, we are so similar. Like, we are so similar. We do some of the same things. Um, I decided that I needed also to go and get diagnosed. And I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but ADHD can manifest differently in women, which is often part of the reason why, as girls, we don't get diagnosed as often as boys do, especially our generation. Um, and
Why
one of
is
the
that?
interesting,
Question? I'm actually curious to know if you have done some research on,
yeah,
why.
Yeah, and I think, and Jana may be able to answer this question as well, but it does manifest differently. And so when, like, our generation, a lot of teachers are often the people that will mention it to parents, and so they're looking for hyperactivity more often than inattention, and it manifests a lot in women as inattention. Not always. Like, I have both. So for me, I have the hyperactivity and the inattention, and that can be pretty common. But when they're looking for um, the characteristics or the traits, a lot of times in past they've been looking at that. And I don't know, Jana, if you have anything to add to that as well.
Well, I think there are a couple things also that are going on. There are different methods of diagnosis. And so who's making the diagnosis can influence what they see, right? There are gender assumptions that we make about boys and girls, women and men, because we live in a very binary society where you're either or. And if you're one or the other, there are people project onto us the way we're supposed to be. So girls are quiet, girls are thoughtful, girls are nice, girls are dot dot dot. So if a boy is boisterous and he's busy running around and can't sit still, then it must be ADHD. But if a girl is sitting still, maybe it's not ADHD. And we
Right.
know that that's not the case.
That's right.
And even, Question, you and I with ADHD, it'll show up differently for us.
Yeah.
Well, Janai, you've actually written some really wonderful articles that actually talk about the stereotypes that are associated with ADHD
Right.
and looking past those stereotypes and really, trying to dig into the complex diversity. I believe you referred to it as beautiful diversity
Yeah.
at one point, which I've always enjoyed your writing and your presenting. And ADHD is, I know it's only one of the topics that you write and present on, but as somebody who does not have ADHD, I never thought about how the labeling does not reflect that beautiful and complex diversity here or anywhere else.
It's interesting you say that. And I don't remember what it was you said earlier, Question, that got me thinking about this. Oh, I think it was your son maybe doesn't want to go through the diagnosis
Yep.
process. And to some degree, I don't know that you have to have a formal diagnosis to benefit from these conversations.
I
Now,
agree.
there are a lot of people who self-diagnose, and I have some concerns about the implications of that, to the extent that some of the conversations I feel might be happening are maybe dismissive. Think about somebody who's like, "Oh, I'm having an OCD moment." Well, no, you're not, right?
No.
OCD is
No,
a
and
very real condition, or that is still ADHD.
but there's
Yep.
also the situation where I have told people I have it and it's been diagnosed, and they are very dismissive of it, right? So it's like you
Dismissive
know,
of the diagnosis or
yeah. Oh
dismissive?
yeah, of the diagnosis. Oh, everyone has ADHD.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's just life. Everyone very, so there are, I think it's
That's
important to,
interesting because I believe it's only 3 to 5% of the adult population that actually is attention deficit
mhm,
hyperactive disorder. So what are they getting at when they say everyone has it? Now, I mean, I know that there have not been any formal studies on ADHD in accounting, but there have been many informal studies, and it does appear there are actually articles in CPA Practice Advisor and Accounting Today on ADHD in the accounting profession. It does appear that we have a larger number of folks, but again, there have not been any formal studies, and I want to help change that. But so I'm surprised to hear somebody would say everybody has ADHD. Does that just mean everybody struggles with attention at times?
I think it's because there's this tendency to think, well, everybody procrastinates, well, everybody gets distracted, as if procrastination and distraction are the two things that come with ADHD. Those are just one of two of a series of different ways that ADHD manifests. And so I think one of the challenges is that people don't see this as a clinical diagnosis. I love that you
mhm,
use that phrase. And there's the DSM, the diagnosis. It's the
mhm.
manual used to diagnose different mental conditions, psychological conditions, and ADHD is in there. We're not making it up. And yes, people get distracted, but there's not necessarily an underlying neurological reason for that distraction.
That's
Um,
right.
and I think, one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about was validating that, because there are different types of ADHD. There's ADHD that's predominantly inattentive. There's
Yes.
ADHD that's predominantly um, distracted, not distracted, predominantly
Hyperactive.
hyperactive. And then there's both. And the
Yes.
presentation of both is the most common. Um, but I think we hear ADHD and we dumb it down. Maybe dumb it down isn't the right phrase. We dismiss it, we marginalize it, we
Dismiss.
reduce it to, oh, you're just distracted.
I
Mm.
agree. And just, oh, we live in a society now where people are on all their devices. I mean, I've actually had people make this comment to me a couple of times, and I very rarely take offense to comments that people make to me. But I was at a conference once, and someone absolutely dismissed the diagnosis, and I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm sorry. Have you lived in my life? Have you walked in my shoes? Are you my doctor suddenly?
Yeah, I think sometimes I felt like oh my gosh, I'm having an ADHD moment. And inside, I'm like, no, you're not. But I'm smiling on the outside because there's a time to pick your battles, right? And
Yeah.
there's a time to educate. And that's the fine line that we have to walk, because if somebody says something that makes it sound like, well, everybody gets distracted, or, I procrastinate. It's not why I don't have ADHD.
Now, as somebody who does not have ADHD, I want to make sure, again, we're only talking about 3 to 5% of the adult population here. And so for those listening who are not familiar with this, I'm just going to run through a short list of some symptoms.
Some symptoms. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had mentioned predominantly inattentive versus predominantly hyperactive impulsive. In adults, obviously you talked about distractibility, forgetfulness, disorganization, and daydreaming. But the hyperactive part of it is very different in adults than it is in children. And I thought it was extremely interesting that in adults, the hyperactive part can actually feel like internal agitation, racing thoughts, or a sense of urgency, which is very different than like the overt disruptive behavior that my brother exhibited in school as a child, right? It is associated with stress and anxiety. Um, so I thought that was interesting.
It is. And I would say that for myself, I can see that. So I do still have the restlessness and the fidgeting, but I am so much, and this goes down, this is masking, and this is something we're going to talk about later. I have spent my adult life, because I was late diagnosed as well, trying to, like, if I'm in a meeting, trying to hide that. So it becomes for me, it's like if I can't express it and move my body the way that I need to, then it does become internal agitation. Like it moves inward. So I think that is, it is a difference from when I was a child, where my grandmothers say to me, she's like, you're just bouncing off the walls all the time. And it was climbing furniture. I mean, it was all hanging from the ceiling almost, just all over the place. So they put me in gymnastics. That was how how we dealt with it. But
That tracks. Yeah.
yeah. She's like, me too. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now you mentioned masking behaviors. Let's actually talk a little bit about that. I mean, you had when we were preparing for this, you were talking about the executive function challenges that sometimes get overlooked, and the functional freeze, I think you called it, where you feel stuck or paralyzed. So how are people masking these kinds of things as adults in the accounting industry, women in particular?
Was that for me? Because I thought, Question, you had identified some of those things, and actually, I was curious about the functional freeze. I hadn't heard that phrase exactly
yeah.
before.
Yeah. I think, well, I feel like the way that it manifests for me is that I am constantly, maybe not specifically a functional freeze, but just in general, is like over preparing for everything and feeling like if I don't over prepare for everything, that I'm not going to be able to manage whatever it is that is happening, whether it's a presentation or a client meeting. And I have gotten to the point where it's become very difficult for me to emotionally hide my overwhelm, but that's one of the other common ways that people mask. It's something that I have done for a long time, but then I think it's like gotten personally to the tipping point where I'm just like, I can't. And Nancy will hear from me, and and I'm like, I'm over the top. I'm stressed and overwhelmed and exhausted and all the things. So that's kind of some of the way that it manifests for
Yeah.
me. How about for you, Jana?
Well, I think decision paralysis is a very real thing.
Absolutely.
And part of it is that, so funny story. I was at Trader Joe's the other day. So we've been having some issues with our dog. There's been some very emotional challenges because of his health. And one night my husband and I were just exhausted. So I thought, I don't know about you, but I could use some ice cream right now. So I got up and I went to Trader Joe's. And decision paralysis, what that looks like is you're standing in Trader Joe's, and instead of coming home with 2 things, you come home with 8 things. And And why does this happen? Because I'm overloaded with the different decisions I have to make, and I'm afraid to make the wrong decision. So I end up bringing home more things. This happens a lot. So that's just a silly example, but I think part of what happens with the ADHD brain is that you are taking in so much information. You're
Mm-hmm.
scanning and you're multi-processing, but not in ways that are filtering information because our brain doesn't do the best job of filtering. And so, yeah, so that's why you get stuck. And that is a different type of overwhelm.
Yeah, I really struggle with that professionally sometimes too. So if I have, a list of a handful of big things that I need to accomplish, for example, it's like, okay, I have all of these big things. And then I get into a spiral in my mind, like which one do I start with? And it's like, I'll go for one and then I go for the other. And then I just get so overwhelmed and I have a really difficult time taking a step back and prioritizing one. And I know we're going to talk about some ways to do that later, but it's like I have to medicine helps me a lot with that. And I also have to really turn everything else off in my life, or I can't focus on that one thing. And opening email will cause that functional freeze or that indecision so much, because then it's like I decided I'm going to work on this one thing. And then I open my email and I'm like, this thing's kind of urgent, but it's not life ending. It's accounting, So
But what it does is there's a high level of reward and stimulus. And in the ADHD brain, if it doesn't offer that reward, if it doesn't really draw you in with interest, if there isn't an immediate payoff in some way, it's not so interesting. You move on to the thing that is interesting. And
Now that sounds like a very human thing. I mean, I don't, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD. I don't think that it is something that is a part of my life. Maybe I'm wrong, but what you just described is something that I think most humans do. How is it different for people with a clinical diagnosis of ADHD and women in particular? I know hormonal cycles come into play, estrogen comes into play, not being diagnosed early on comes into play, but
yeah,
where's that
that's a
line?
question. I think
I
it's a
was,
great question.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, Nancy, I'm so glad you asked that
Yes,
because
same.
I happen to prepare for that. And I say that because there's dopamine and there's norepinephrine. And dopamine levels are responsible for that processing, that reward processing, that sense of urgency. And in the ADHD brain, dopamine levels aren't consistent. Sometimes they fluctuate and sometimes
Yeah.
they're lower. And so as a result of that, it can be harder to simply regulate those things. So there's a actual hormonal imbalance that is happening in a fluctuation that is happening that just make those kinds of that kind of processing more difficult. And then when you look at things like estrogen and progesterone for women as we age or as we go through our monthly cycles, those levels fluctuate. And there's a relationship between estrogen and dopamine.
Yes.
And estrogen helps us do a better job of regulating so that the dopamine impact isn't as strong. And as our estrogen levels start to drop, the struggle becomes more obvious. I mean, it was always there, but as we get older, it can feel like things got harder. And so there's a hormonal explanation for this.
And this might also be part of the reason why women are being diagnosed more frequently later in life. And also to your point about it's easier for us to choose things that are interesting to us. So it's hard when you have a number of things that you need to be working on or doing that aren't interesting because they don't give you a dopamine reward. And our brains are looking for that dopamine. And that is why we can hyper focus on things that are really interesting to us. So it's like not that we can't hyper focus at all. It's just, it's difficult. I can't choose what I'm gonna hyper focus, or I feel like I can't. Yeah,
Yeah,
That would be
it's
nice. I
difficult.
mean,
Yeah.
it would be fantastic if you could
yeah,
just turn it on.
Yeah, you can
yeah,
say, today I'm going to hyper focus on this and get it done. But
yeah.
I think that the other hormone, the norepinephrine, it's part of that because what's hard for us to do is regulate what we're focusing on. Right. So
Yes.
something's interesting and we can pay attention to that. And then we pay attention to that. It's called a shiny thing. Like I have shiny things popping up all over the place, but which is the one that I focus on?
Right.
And that can be difficult to decide what to focus on. Or the payoff is so strong, I get locked in and I can't get out. It's why sometimes I'm working until 3 a.m. because in theory I'm on a roll, but in fact I'm hyper focused, which hopefully we talk about time blindness somewhere along the way, because
Yeah.
that's also related to what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Agree.
that idea that the symptoms are likely to become stronger later in life because of the difference in the estrogen levels, this has to be one of the reasons that women so often go undiagnosed.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Sorry,
you
go ahead,
also mentioned that the tools were actually designed around boys' behavior, the hyperactive and the disruptive part of it. So let's talk a little bit about this missing period of diagnosis when women are girls.
So I think part of what happens as women is we are generally socialized and there's an expectation that we're going to behave in particular ways. And so we're going to be a little bit more quiet. We're going to be what seems to be more thoughtful. Um, we're going to hold back being impulsive, because if you are impulsive, it could suggest you're emotional. And that tag for women has been a very marginalizing and dismissive, disrespectful tag or a label. And so we find ways to compensate for this. And so we find strategies. And I wouldn't say those are ADHD strategies. These are just the things that women do to comply with those norms, if you will. That's strong language.
It's a societal
Yeah.
a reaction to what the societal expectations for our gender are.
And then there's also some natural tendencies that women have. Women tend to be more collaborative. Women tend to be more compassionate. Women tend to think more about emotional connection. But as we get older, for some of us, and I'll just say this with an I statement, look, I ain't got time for all that. Like, I'm just tired. Like, I am, I just don't care. And it's not true, but you just lose bandwidth,
Yes.
putting in all this energy around something. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's not that important to me anymore. I have other challenges to navigate. And I think some of that is just resilience that chips away at, you've worked so hard to compensate for something. And imagine picking up a 10-pound weight. It's not that heavy. Well, let's go with the
Depends
2-pound
how
weight.
far you're carrying it.
Depends on what you're
That's my
doing with
point,
it.
though. That's my point. Imagine you're doing a bicep curl. So you're lifting up the weight and now you're holding it midair, right? So you're holding it not all the way up, you're holding it halfway up. And you just have to hold it like that for 10 years. At first, it doesn't seem that hard. Eventually, it gets heavy, but you can do it. And then it gets to the point where it's so heavy, you're struggling to do it, and you're asking yourself, why am I even doing this? And then at some point, you're like, oh, hell, and you just throw it down. Like, that's what I'm talking about. That happens.
That is such
over
a good
time.
analogy. And it actually, there are a lot of comorbidities that are associated with ADHD. And to clarify, comorbidities doesn't mean it's causal. It just means
Right.
there is a correlation in some folks with ADHD with stress, anxiety, depression. And if I were holding
Well, can I
a
interrupt you for
10-pound
just-
weight for that many years, I would be stressed and depressed and anxious also.
And I just wanted to tweak that language a little bit.
Okay, please do.
Because comorbidity is the presence of more than one. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily causal.
Right.
Yes.
So-
That's right.
That's
There's a
why I was saying
higher
it was a
likelihood.
correlation,
Yeah.
not a causation.
Not a
Exactly.
causation.
It's not
Correct.
even a correlation. It's like you can have allergies and asthma, and one has nothing to do with the other.
do
But
with
if
the
you
other.
have one, you're more likely to have another,
Likely.
if you will. And so with
Makes sense.
ADHD, what happens is if you are diagnosed with ADHD, you are more likely to also be diagnosed with other things like autism spectrum disorder, anxiety or depressive disorders, bipolar disorder, Tourette syndrome. Like, there is data that shows that when you have one type of disorder like this, you are statistically more likely to have a second. It doesn't mean you will, but it doesn't come as a surprise if you do.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it even harder, by the way. It makes navigating ADHD even more difficult if you don't have
Yes.
diagnosis and you have these symptoms and you don't have an explanation. Because I will say that that diagnosis was so powerful for me. It explained a
Same.
lot, and it gave me permission, and it stripped away some of the negative self-talk that was happening because you're just so ... right? Like, it was something
Yes.
wrong with me. It wasn't wrong with me. It's just the way I was, and it doesn't make it bad.
I
Well, I'm
feel
curious
like
for both of you. Yeah,
I
go
feel
ahead.
like, yeah, when I got my diagnosis and I started researching it and learning about all of the ways that it manifests, I was like, my whole life made sense to me. You know, it's like there are these things that I would do that would like drive my family or my parents crazy. And they had no idea, you know, like I cannot remember to send a birthday card to save my life, you know, and it's like just not something that I could do. You know, they were always like, why do you start a hobby and you can't finish it? And I've kind of talked about this before. It's like I have so many hobbies and it's like I love it and I like dive in and I'm all about it. And then I'm like, I'm over it now. And they're like, why can't you just pick one thing? You know, so there are all these things throughout life that it just getting that diagnosis, and it helped me really understand myself a lot better and prevented me from feeling this level of guilt about just who I was. I just felt like I wasn't, it's like, oh, I'm not good. There's something wrong with me
It's like
because I
imposter
do.
syndrome on steroids.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good analogy.
Ooh, say that again.
I said imposter syndrome on steroids is what it
Yes,
feels like.
that's
So it's imposter
fascinating.
syndrome on
Yeah.
top of imposter syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared that with us, Question, because I was about to ask the two of you what's the real life impact been, not just having ADHD, but having a diagnosis. How have things changed for each of you? Question told us a little bit about it. Jana, I'm curious. Again, you both had late diagnoses, which we've
Yeah.
discussed is very common for women. What's been the real life impact?
Well, I will say self-awareness has been the single most powerful thing that I can put a label on things. One of the things I read in that book when I was reading through the different, presentations was an inability to read social cues. Look, I'm going to get emotional now. Sorry. And the reason
No,
Oh,
being I was
please.
please. There's
Yeah.
no, we have a
Hey,
rule. We
I'm
don't
gonna say
apologize for our emotions.
no, and I'm gonna say that before you go into this, you mentioned earlier about how we are not allowed to be emotional. And I want to turn that on its head. I'm gonna say, like, I am emotional and it is my strength.
Yes.
It is my strength.
Yeah.
And it's like we need to embrace it. Like I'm emotional and you know,
And isn't that
be
wonderful?
emotional.
Isn't that,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So please,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Janelle,
it's
be
please.
wonderful.
emotional
It's
with us.
wonderful. And but what happened for me when I read that is those were words that were not in my vocabulary. That was an awareness that was in my vocabulary. And so I just thought there was something wrong. It's an example of that. And understanding that changed the game for me. And by that I mean, if I was having difficulty reading social cues, then Jana learn how to read social cues, right? So it put me in a position of empowerment because now I can watch for things that I didn't watch for before. Now, what happened for me was I went to the other extreme. I became so worried that I wasn't reading the cues right, or I was picking up on the wrong cues, or I don't know what the cues are going to be. So I found myself pulling back and withdrawing a little bit
Mhm.
until I could sort of calibrate. Now, I'm still not that great at it, but I know this about me. And because I know this about me, I can either be a little bit more open with the person that's like, I'm having difficulty interpreting what that means, right? Like I can actually use words
Yes.
I have words, I could use them, right? And really find ways to settle into a conversation or just find strategies. And I will tell you, the number one person who has helped me with this is my husband. Um,
Really? That's wonderful.
yeah,
How so? What are some ways that
there's another story there. So my husband and I were having, he can't remember what we were talking about, and he remembers it as an argument. And that we were either debating or discussing something, and I was saying something, and in his mind, he's like, I don't even know. How could she be saying this? Like, how is this woman I've known for all these years and I love saying that? Right. And then he said, wait a second, maybe there's more to the story. He just kept doing this over and over again to the point where he had to think, let me just step back and figure out what's going on. And the
which,
more
by
we,
the way, is a beautiful example of giving someone the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like the more that we give each other the benefit of the doubt, the more likely we are going to be to help each other get underneath the surface of something.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why learning to understand difference is powerful, because I don't expect you to know that I have ADHD. But what I'm hoping we can all do by educating is add that to the lists of, that's it. Like, there could be something else at play here rather than going straight to judgment.
You talked
But
about this in your Scaling New Heights keynote this
yeah,
year, earlier
yeah,
this year. It was absolutely wonderful. You had that wonderful slide of the iceberg and digging beneath, looking at, but presuming that there is more under the waterline
yeah,
than what you can see above the waterline. I
yeah.
love that analogy.
Oh yeah, that is beautiful.
Remind me to come back to that.
All right, I will.
But the conversation with my husband, the thing, and by the way, I'm proud of myself for remembering, because I usually don't remember. Anyway, the thing that was most powerful is for us to understand communication styles. And so it's the way he describes it, is the cleaning out of the junk drawer. So everybody has one of those drawers, and there are two general ways you clean it out. One is you open the drawer, you take out all the things that you want to keep, right? Maybe you dust them off, maybe you reorganize them, and then everything else you dump it in the trash.
I love it.
Like, but that's his way of doing it. My way of doing it is you just dump everything out. And that would cause my husband, like, he would have hives or something if he did that. Like, that is too messy. But it was the same way in our communication. What we both learned, and where we had hidden frustrations, is he would think and think and think. And so there are no words coming out of his mouth. And then finally he'd give me a phrase. He'd give me a word. And I get frustrated because I feel like, that's it. And I'm not thinking, did you consider this? Did you consider this? Did you consider this? Right? Because for me, those considerations have all been put out here as words. So I'm saying it could be A, it could be B, it could be C, it could be D. What about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And my husband is like, what is she talking about? And that was the aha moment that we realized there's more going on here, And so now our rule, by the way, is if my husband doesn't say much, I say, Gerard, I need you to give me more than that.
That's wonderful.
And Gerard has given me permission. I can just talk. Blah, 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 blah. And then I have to say, oh, I need you to, this is the part you need to hear. And then
I was going to add, there's got to be a hint for him to be able to filter all of your verbal processing. So I love that. So you're actually processing verbally all you want, but he has permission to tune out.
Absolutely. He doesn't have to listen to me until I say, hey, this is the part I need you to hear. And usually what I've done is I've thrown all the words out there, and then I'm like, oh, wait, this is what I was trying to say. And then I can tune back in with him.
I just learned something right now. Maybe I did. I'm going to ask the question. Is verbal processing often an ADHD like symptom? Or is it something that comes along with it, right? Because that's what I do. I'm a huge verbal processor. I can't, it does not, everyone's always like, journal. And I'm like, I can't journal. That does nothing for me. I have to say it out loud.
Thank you.
I'm the same way.
Thank you. I can't journal either.
No, me
when
neither.
I did try to journal, I tried it by talking into my phone.
I've thought
Oh,
about
that's
that. Yeah.
wonderful. And one of our earliest guests, I think our very first guest on the program, Lynette Osconnell, she journals by she's got a wonderful Instagram channel where she's constantly doing videos where she's talking about different topics having to do with burnout. But that started as journaling for her. She'd do videos of herself for herself, which I just think is absolutely fascinating. So
Yeah,
you
that's
can, just to
probably
clarify, you can be a verbal processor without having ADHD, but I
Yes.
wonder,
yeah, of course.
is that something that is correlated?
Yeah,
I can't
I'm
say that I've
wondering
done
too.
any research on that, but
I
now I
haven't
might have
either.
to do that because
I
that sounds
know.
fascinating.
Yeah. All right.
Now I'm curious.
All right, we're going to do
For
some
sure.
research. Question:
I
if you find
know.
the answer, you let me know.
I will. Same for you.
Yeah, I will.
So the two of you are just amazing to me because you both have accomplished so much. You are kind and empathetic people who take interest in others. You contribute to society in so many different ways, which means to me that clearly you have come up with some tools and some strategies for managing ADHD. And I would love for our audience to be able to hear some of what those are and which ones have worked for you. I would also love to hear if there are some that you tried that did not work for you.
And I want to add, I know we need to talk about time blindness. So if we
Oh,
start with
yes.
that, right? Like I know, Jana, you wanted to talk about it. So time blindness is something, if you want to describe what that is and then talk about tools that you use to manage it, because I know you have a lot of them.
So my question, I'm so glad you asked. So what is the definition? Like I have some notes here, folks. So the definition of time blindness is the inability to recognize when time has passed or to estimate how long something will take.
Oh my gosh.
And I struggle with this. And so I did do a little bit of research here. And the thing that I found really fascinating is something called, I think I'm saying this right, scalar expectancy theory. And basically, what happens is it says there are two things that happen in our brain. One of them they described as the pacemaker. So think of what's the thing that goes tick, tick, tick when you're playing piano?
Oh, what's it called?
That thing, people.
That
Whatever
thing.
that
Yeah.
thing
Da, da,
is.
da, da, da.
I was going to say monotone,
I'm
but that's not it.
That's what I thought
no,
it was.
I
No,
had
that's
it until you said the wrong word because
Well,
now it's
this theory calls it a pacemaker, so it sets a pace, right? But then there's something called the accumulator, and so the accumulator is what counts up all of the little pulses in this pace. And what happens is if your pacemaker works faster, you're collecting more pulses, and as a result, you are thinking more time has passed than actually has, or vice versa. If your pacemaker is
Mm,
slower, you're underestimating time. And so there are a lot of things that can happen here as well. It could be dopamine. It could be your dopamine levels are making it hard to track time intervals. And when I wanted to put together some examples of what it looks like, it could be you're missing deadlines. It could be you're over or underestimating how much time something will take. Um, and it has
Mine is,
nothing to do with not managing time. People think it's time management, and I think it's time processing. And it can
yes.
even be something called like regulating speed. So, question, I'm really curious about this for you. It could be like, try to walk slower. Like, try that. Is it
Can't.
not the most painful thing to
Yeah,
have to
can't.
slow, like change your physical movement speed?
Yes. Like it is not possible. So I was in the airport with my son yesterday and he hurt his knee in soccer and he's like, slow down. And so I'd slow down for a second and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoop, and he's way back here. And
And
it was
this
whoop.
feeling,
It's just,
and you're feeling unsettled. That feeling of that
yes.
hyperactivity is almost tactile at that point.
Yeah. Oh,
that's
absolutely.
fascinating. And by the
Yeah.
word, the word is metronome. It came to
It
me.
is. It came
Yes.
to me too. I was like,
Oh, what did we
my
say? Monotone?
yeah, I was like, so
We were
close.
Metronome.
close. We were close.
Mine is slow. My metronome is slow. So
Mine is all over the place. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's off. So yeah.
So how do you manage this? If it's so if you can't try to walk slower, try to manage your time, try to try to process time differently. That sounds impossible. So what are I know that you are both doing an incredible job managing these struggles. What are you doing? How do you handle this?
All right,
What's
I
the
say
don't
we take
know.
solution?
turns. Like, question, what's one of yours?
Well, one of the things that I have to do is, and this actually works pretty well for me, is I have to shut off all notifications. I have to put my phone on D&D, and then I have to say to myself, okay, because I like to get up from my desk and go do stuff. I'm like up and down and up and down. And so I'm like, okay, for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to work on this one thing. And then that helps me understand A, how long it takes me to complete something and recognize it, and B, to like help me focus on something that is clearly I don't want to be focusing on for whatever reason. But I gotta be honest, like I don't have it figured out. I still really struggle with it a lot.
Well, one of the things that we do sometimes that is really helpful is I can be your accountability partner, right? Like we'll get on a call together to write up notes for the podcast, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to be sitting there if you're going to be on camera with me. Like that's a, a requirement. And so I know that that's something that some of the women who you and I got to spend some time with at Appy Camp, Jana, who there were some women there who have ADHD and were saying that if they could, coming back from that experience of finding out that they were not alone in the world, they decided to be accountability partners to each other.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, I
huge
want to
thing.
hear, what do you do?
Everything and nothing. So
That's how I
specifically,
feel.
well, I think it was interesting what you said because I have tried saying for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to do X. And so at the end of the 30 minutes, I looked up and I did X, one, ABC. I did like all these things because one thing, oh, which reminds me, that reminds me. You know what? And next thing
Yep.
you know, I'm 7 things in and I haven't actually done anything. So
Anything? Oh,
um, I
that's
I
why
I've given up on that strategy. I'm so glad it works for you. And I feel like if you could send me a pill so that I could take the pill and do that, I would.
it
Um,
doesn't always work. That's why I said
yeah.
I don't necessarily have it figured out, because if I, for example, I cannot get in my email. If I get
Yes.
in my email, I'm done. Like I am just, it's all over. And so during that 30-minute time, because I will have a thought, just like you're saying, and it's like I have to try to remember to shut my thoughts down. So I'll be doing something else, and it's like, oh shoot, I needed to pay the electric bill. And I'm like, so what I try to do is during those 30 minutes, like make myself not allowed to do anything else, because I have a tendency to like, I'll get antsy and I'll like come up with a reason to go downstairs. I'm like, I need a snack or water or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so,
I'm
but
always
Well, can
it's
looking
I
at the
not.
point
game
out
like,
that that
check,
is
check, check.
also a superpower that both of you have, which is maybe you didn't get that one thing that you were supposed to do done in that 30 minutes, but look at the 7 things that actually did need to
Yeah.
happen that you accomplished during that
Yeah.
30 minutes. I mean, like
Yeah.
that one thing going to the next, going to the next, going to the next, and actually accomplishing all of those things on this winding path, that is one of the superpowers. And
Yeah.
also, I know a lot of people with ADHD because as I've mentioned, I'm pretty sure this is more common in accounting than it is in some other industries. But you'll sit down for 30 minutes to do the one thing. The one thing doesn't happen. You do the 7 things, but you have also sat down sometimes for 2 hours because the hyperfocus got
Yeah.
triggered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you
That's
guys
I
tell
true.
think,
us a little bit about hyperfocus and what that feels like to you?
well, I want to go back and share one of my hacks that has to do with what you just said.
Okay.
And I won't remember your question, Nancy. So
It's
hopefully you will.
okay. We'll
Good
come
one.
back to it. I'll
Um,
remember it.
for me, part of how I manage that type of productivity is none of my notifications are on ever. But there are 2 things that I've learned. Number one is the focus settings. I have an iPhone, and on the iPhone, there are focus settings. And so, for example, Mondays are supposed to be my writing days. And so my phone automatically at 9 a.m. turns off all notifications. It doesn't
Yeah.
ring. There's nothing that shows up on my screen. And what's funny about that is, it's like 11 o'clock on a Monday, and I'm like, wow, nobody's texted. Oh, of course they've texted me. I've just ignored them. But
So this
the
is,
thing
you
with
can actually, I know that you can schedule the do not disturb, my phone goes on do not disturb after a certain hour at night. I didn't realize you could do that for different days, have a different schedule
Yeah.
for different days. That's
You
a
can have a
great
schedule,
tip.
and you can do other things like at night at 11 o'clock. So visual cues are so important. So what I was going to share is that my calendar, I have 16 different calendars on my Google Calendar so that I can control the colors because I am so
Mm.
highly visual. And one of the sleep focus mode on my phone, 7 days a week, not only does it turn on automatically at 11 o'clock, but it dims down, it grays out all of the icons. So all of the
Wow.
icons almost turn into a black and white. So it changes even the visual draw of them. Now ask me how I did it. I have no idea. Like I was playing around with the settings and I was like, oh, this is great. But it
This
does it. It also tells me visually, oh, look, it's 11 o'clock.
So I'm naughty and I turned mine off. I'm like, oh, I turned it on. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to bed yet, or I don't want to do that. And I'm just like, boop, turn it off. And then all this
Then you lose
So
everything.
you had you're setting up these practical tools, but
Yeah.
then in the moment you're undoing them. You're not following your own rules. Is that what you're
Except
saying?
Except I think the habit of doing that, you also know that you like there's another thing, like even though you do it, it's become part of your process,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Now,
Yeah.
and the thing that you were talking about with the different colored calendars, that sounds to me a lot like time blocking, which I know has been extreme. I mean, I again, not ADHD here, but I use time blocking for practically everything. I find it extremely helpful, and I know that that's another tool that a lot of folks with ADHD do. What about some support systems that y'all are leaning into?
I'm like, support systems? I
Well,
don't
we
think
talked about accountability partners, but therapy,
yeah.
coaching. I know some people who've had really great experiences with that.
I mean, mine is probably more so like medical, I guess, right? So my support system would be, I mean, I have a therapist. We don't talk a lot about ADHD, but I have medicine that I take. They give me Ritalin because the other one, what's it called?
Adderall.
Adderall is a little too strong for me. So they have me on like a kid dose of Ritalin, which seems to do the job for me just fine. Most of the time.
Well, it's interesting you
So,
say that because medication affects our brains differently. There's Ritalin, there's Adderall, there's Vyvanse. Those are the real common ones. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have epilepsy, and I literally just was at the neurologist the other day, and he said, I noticed you never filled your prescription for Adderall. And I had long acting Adderall. And I said, well, because it made me feel this way. He said, well, we can just put you on a different medication. And he explained how, don't ask me, I can't tell you what he said, but that it could be that the way it was affecting my brain resulted in me feeling the things that I was feeling. So just switch to a different medication. So for
Mm-hmm.
anybody listening, if you've been resistant to medications, you had a reaction on one, try another before you dismiss it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad
and
to hear that works for
you
you.
had mentioned earlier that as we age and our hormones change, especially those hormones that are related to ADHD, you might have to change your
Yeah.
medication as well because those
Yeah.
hormonal changes are going to affect how the medication is affecting your brain. And hormone therapy replacement can actually be a solution for menopause related
Yep.
changes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Estrogen replacement
Yeah.
therapy. I know people have different opinions about that, but if it's something that you are interested and open to exploring, that can help with the regulation of the dopamine.
Yes.
Even though we're struggling with dopamine levels, like you're having compounding issues. So by using medication on both sides, you're starting to level out um, some of those effects that you're having.
Now, you
Yeah.
told me to remind you to come back
Yes.
to a couple of things, and they're related to what I want to talk about next anyway. You talked about coming back to the iceberg, and you talked about hyper focus because the ADHD is a superpower for me as a boss, for me as boss lady of my own company and a lot of people, I have had to learn to not see ADHD as as only a negative. I have had to learn, hey, there's some pretty amazing things that come from ADHD as well. And I know hyperfocus is one of them. And you told me to come back to that.
Yeah, I think that hyperfocus, it's great if you can manage it. And I think part of
Mhm.
the reason maybe there's that negative view is because people sometimes use ADHD as an excuse.
You're
Like
right.
they blame their problem on having ADHD rather than leaning into the strength. So
Mhm.
hyperfocus means when I'm in the zone, I can really work. And so if, Nancy, if you were my boss and we have an understanding that I say, listen, I'm in the zone, then you trust that I'm going to get my work done and say, you know what, Elizabeth, Janah's going dark because she's really in the zone, and that's okay. It doesn't mean I get to blow other things off. I'm still held accountable, but it's understanding that I'm in a particular work mode, and that is a superpower for me. And when I'm in that work mode, I am really going to knock stuff out.
And this is
Um,
Yeah.
one of the many reasons that I am a huge fan of flexible schedules and
Mhm.
remote part-time work. These
Work.
are
Yeah.
all things that can, if you have these as a policy in your firm and you've done personality tests and had open discussions with your team members about what works for them, you can actually help them set up a schedule that is going to make them more productive. And if they're more productive, they're generally happier.
yeah. I will
Um,
give one caveat, and that is self-disclosure at work. There are people who worry about self-disclosure because if you disclose something to your boss, sometimes, and it depends on the size of organizations listeners are in, sometimes the HR team will have to feel this obligation to now do some things, compensate in some ways. And so it can be uncomfortable to go on the record, right, with
yeah.
Well,
something.
wouldn't
They
that be a
just want
Yeah.
good
to do
thing
this
if
understanding how you work. You don't have to reveal that you have ADHD if you can explain where your strengths are.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, I'll be honest, doing a podcast and sharing openly and vulnerably, like, that I struggle at certain times to complete a task that's not something I'm as interested in. I mean, I'm sure that I have clients that listen, we have colleagues that listen, and so it is a challenge, I think, but openly, and it's different in the workplace, right? But openly sharing about it, I think, is what has having somebody else openly share about it is what helped me really gain that understanding about
Mm.
myself, which is so important and life changing.
Yeah.
So some of
And
the other benefits of ADHD that I have heard about that I'm curious to know if
Oh,
either of you personally have experienced. Yes?
I
Are
have
we
one.
pausing? Yeah?
No, I'm not
Oh,
pausing. I was just saying that I've that this is I have heard I can't cite some research on this because I've read it many times, but I've never I didn't actually find a piece of data on it. But um a lot of women who I've spoken to, and myself included, and Jana, I would be interested to see or hear if this is the case for you as well. Like, I have a high sense of intuition and emotional awareness in other people, and I am extremely empathetic, like
that
extremely empathetic.
those are markers for ADHD, yes.
Yes.
And
Yep.
highly creative, which is me, because you tend to think about a lot of things. Ideation is something that people with ADHD tend to be good at. Um, you don't think, you don't even have a box to think inside of. So that's the positives of the ADHD brain, or some of the ways that it shows up. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listing those because those are mine. When I did a couple of assessments, a couple of things that came back to me were honesty, empathy, um, creativity, ideation, appreciation of beauty and excellence. That's one of the reasons I have a policy. I am not allowed to wear headphones or have devices when I'm out walking Doug. Um, and it's great because on the one hand, it allows me to be distracted. I'm like, oh, look at that bird. Hey, there's a flower. Why is that twig there? Ooh, look at that rock on the road. Like I do that all the time, but it also means I'm being absolutely present and appreciating what's around me. So I'm giving my brain permission to just be, right? And it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um,
So
uh,
we probably should wrap up, but I wanted to say quickly before, unless you have anything else you want to add, this has been this has been enlightening. I feel like this has been a therapy session for me. Just being able to sit here and talk to somebody else who has it and has similar experiences, and to be able to share ours, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Especially Nancy, you balancing us out because I feel no, that's important though. I feel like what you're showing for others is that you don't have to have ADHD to understand it. And you experience some of the very same things, but it just shows up differently for you.
It shows up differently, and I think the scale of it is very different. One of the things that my therapist always reminds me is every once in a while I'll worry that something that I have going on, I'll say, "Well, how do I know if I have X, Y, or Z thing in my life?" And she said, "It's doesn't become a clinical diagnosis until whatever it is that you're dealing with interferes with your life."
Yes.
And that is the point where you start to put a name on it. And so I think it's important for everyone here who's listening to remember that just because you have issues with this, that, or the other thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have ADHD,
Right.
because we all struggle with a lot of these things to maybe lesser extent than people
Right.
who would end up with a clinical diagnosis. And I think it's also important to remember that, these superpowers are double-edged. And, every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I must have ADHD because I have these things. And when I remember scale wise that, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have the same creativity that y'all do, but I also don't have to deal with idea overload.
You
You
are
know,
very creative,
Thank you
Yeah.
exceptionally
very
creative,
much. I do
Justin.
not think of myself that way, except in the
You are.
kitchen.
Oh, you are. And I think that the other thing that's important about that is it's not just that you are creative, and I have this list in front of me. There are 20 different, what they call chronic disturbances. You can have any one of them. You can have 5 or 6 of them. That just makes you human. But when you have 10, 12, and 14 of them, perhaps there's something else that's happening in the brain. And so
Yes,
that's what's important to
absolutely.
remember. We all have all of these things a little bit, but some of us have a lot of these things all the time.
A lot of it.
Well, thank you so much for coming and being a therapist for Question over here. And
And vice versa. Vice versa.
as we wrap up, we'd love to ask listeners to please follow our She Counts podcast LinkedIn page and to join in on this very conversation by sharing under the episode ADHD Chaos with a Side of Brilliance, which I think, Question, that was a brilliant title that you
Thank
picked for this
you.
episode.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
so
before we
share with
sign
us
off,
your experiences with ADHD, whether it's as a boss, as a coworker, as somebody who struggles with it yourself, whether you've been diagnosed or not, whether you were diagnosed in your childhood. Please share your experiences with ADHD with us on that LinkedIn page. We're very, very happy to see our followers number on LinkedIn has exploded. It's wonderful. So we're having some great conversations, and so thank you to all of you who've been participating in those.
And thank you for having me. This has been amazing.
you've been amazing. This has been, yeah, wonderful. I'm so thankful that you came and shared your knowledge. And before we sign off, I'm going to leave everyone with a quote by you, actually, our esteemed guest. The labels we've been using do not reflect the beautiful, complex diversity that lives within each of us. And that inclusion isn't about them. It's about how we show up for others. It's beautiful.
What a beautiful quote.
Wow,
Janaa.
I said that.
Yes, you did. It was in an article of yours, actually, that I will make sure to link to in the show notes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here with us on She Counts, the Real Talk podcast for women in accounting.
If something in today's episode hit home for you, well, that's exactly why we're doing this.
So you feel seen, heard, and never alone.
Remember that you can get CPE credit for listening at earmark.app. Links to that, as well as how to learn more about our sponsors' solutions and any other resource, will be in the show notes.
And please subscribe, please. It really helps other people find the podcast. And if you can go the extra step and leave us a review as well on whatever platform you're listening on, we would really appreciate it.
We love to read them.
We do. Oh my gosh, it makes us feel so wonderful. As a matter of fact, we're going to start sharing some of them with you on the podcast in later episodes. Please share with another woman in accounting who needs to hear it too.
And many thanks to our amazing guest, Janaa Etienne.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.
We'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.